Hi, I'm Nick. My channel is Fusion Space, and I adapt great but old forgotten comics with a combination of voice acting and condensed narration. This will serve as both my 300 subscriber special and my Patreon announcement video, as I wanted to have a decent amount of commentaries up before I made this. Thanks to everyone who subscribed, and please never feel bad if you can't contribute. I do not expect it. It's just there if my audience grows to include people who can afford to and want to donate, and who want my commentaries. I'll show some clips for people who haven't seen the show, and play some samples from the commentaries to try and show the quality of them. In my show's Storytime, I try to give you a feel for the characters and emotions that make up the story while condensing often many books into a reasonable time frame, similar to a movie. Hopefully you can imagine what a real animated or live adaptation would be like, and you also get a great story out of it. Here's a few examples.
I was part of a team of heroes who confronted Hal. He defeated us utterly. Understand, Hal is not evil. That's not the Hal Jordan I've always known. He believes he's acting for the right reasons, to bring back the 7 million people of Coast City. But he's no less dangerous because of it. Eventually he'll have to be stopped. When that time comes, you'll likely be called upon to be a part of it. After all, you're the last of the Green Lantern Corps. You're wearing one of those powerful weapons in the universe. You could toss it away, or you could accept the responsibility with pride and honor. Responsibility. Something Alex and I talked about a lot. She always told me I never had any, of course. This ring was changing that, though. Look, I appreciate you coming here to tell me all this. I really do. There was so much I didn't know. But I think I need to be alone now, so I can decide what I'm going to do. Of course. Though be aware you can't afford to dally, Kyle. Time is growing short, and you have much to think upon. Times like this are when I came to you, Alex. You were always so much better at seeing things from all angles, thinking them through. I thought this hero thing was a way for me to be somebody, for us to be together. It stopped being fun and games. But I need you here to tell me what to do, because I don't know if there's any way I can handle this by myself. Everything that guy, Alan Scott, told me, this is bigger than I could have imagined. It'd all be so much easier to run away from it all, go back to being who I was. But you wouldn't let me do that, would you? You'd tell me I had responsibilities. To myself, to the ring, to the world, to you. You'd kick me in the butt and tell me to get moving. You were the best thing I ever had, Alex. I loved you, and I won't let you down. They come out of nowhere. 1 second the night is quiet, and the next, I know I'm zeroed. There's dozens of them, and it's gonna be a bad one. Not how you're supposed to use these, but I need to clear some space. Whoa! Huh? 2 pounds of plastique plus 700 ball bearings plus 5 Nucci soldiers equals... Holy jeez, what happened? Wait, what the... Oh! Links disintegrate. Bolt clanks back and forth behind the thudding roar. Brass rains on the sidewalk. The 60 rattles out its song. Song I first heard years ago. Of fire teams dug in on the breaks between the paddy fields, of Tracer lasering the jungle night, of Huey screaming through the void, of Lieutenant Castle getting short and hating it, wanting Nam to last forever. A lullaby come all the way to New York City, come to sing you to sleep. Frank mows down the soldier with the 60 until one of them fires a rocket launcher in the car he's on, and Frank has to dive away. There he goes! Down to the 45 now. 8 bullets, 10 punks. Come on, get it, take him down! Light, damn you. Kevlar took it. Didn't notice. You mother-loving vermin, you are dead! Vinny, move, I got a shot. Damn it, Vinny. Kevlar couldn't stop that one. I said I had him! Or that. Alright, then. Alright. What the? Little man with a big gun. Bam, bam, bam. That's all you are. Bam! God turns the sound off. Then the lights. Any second now.
The alien approaches Batman, cloaked.
See
Batman readies the Predator's own Naginata. It fires at Batman, but the energy blast bounces off his reflective armor. See you too. Batman hurls the Naginata like a spear, puncturing the alien's shoulder and disabling the plasma cannon. The Predator pulls out his Naginata. Fight me? They face one another before the broken bat signal, crouched and ready for battle. The creature comes in with both the Naginata and his wrist blades, and Batman guides the larger weapon into an electrical transformer. The resulting explosion knocks them both off the roof of the GCPD. Son of a... Batman catches the pipe of the Batarang in a line while the alien continues to fall. The Predator slows his fall by dragging his wrist claws down the building. He lands on a police car and bounces off. Batman soon follows, and he warns the cops to back off as the hunter draws and throws his bladed disc. The disc cuts the line Batman is swinging on, and he drops to the ground. Loser. Major surgery. Batman summons the Batmobile by remote. It slams into the alien when it arrives. Not again. Batman gets into the Batmobile and the Predator jumps on top, plunging his claws into the hood. Go. Batman drives the creature away from the city center at top speed as it tries to pry its way into the canopy. Maintain. Get you. The Batmobile nears the woods surrounding the city as the Predator smashes through the windshield. Engage turbo. Pot roast. When he's within a programmed range of the manor, he stops. Near enough. Stop. The alien is thrown clear as the Batmobile skids to a halt in the woods. Batman disappears into the trees and the Predator engages his cloaking device, preparing for the hunt. Search. Destroy.
I think I've gotten pretty good at character voices, many of which are inspired by other performances in other media, but many of which I create from whole cloth. I've always had a very active and interactive imagination, and this show puts it to its best use, helping other people to engage with their imaginations. I also provide some history and context for the stories both in the universe and in the real world, to help people understand the stories and their impact, mostly at the beginning and end of the show. Here's an example.
Hi, I'm Nick, and welcome to Storytime, Batman KnightQuest. In Batman KnightFall, Bane broke the Batman and severely injured Bruce Wayne's spine, and Bruce asked Jean Paul Valley to fill in as Batman. Though warned by Bruce to keep away from Bane, Jean ignored these warnings and fought and defeated Bane, after developing a new costume to go with his more brutal and violent way of doing things. Robin was unable to restrain Jean's impulses, and before he could warn Bruce that he had made a mistake, Bruce left town to search for Robin's kidnapped father, Jack Drake, and Bruce's doctor, Chandra Kinsolving. Still, Knightfall ended on a hopeful note, as Jean held a broken Bane at his mercy, and restrained himself from killing him. Jean Paul's father was a killer, the avenging angel Azrael who policed the ancient order of Saint Dumas, which trained both him and Jean Paul. But perhaps Jean's mind is stronger than the system, the hypnotically placed fight training that allows him to be Batman. Perhaps. This new version of Batman turned many readers away from the book, while many more complained in the letter columns as they watched him drag the name of Batman through the mud with his reckless actions. But many held on, because Bruce never left the books entirely, and his story of world-spanning adventure to rescue the kidnapping victims will appear as KnightQuest The Search, while issues that detail Jean's mission in Gotham bear the subtitle The Crusade. It has been suggested that KnightQuest was meant as a parody of the worst elements of 90s comics, the amount of blades, guns, and lethality found in Jean Paul's Batman equaled only by the amount of psychological trauma. The drive towards humanizing characters in the 60s and 70s had morphed into a grim and gritty style in the 80s which dominated many comics, and by the 90s it was trying to outdo itself and spinning its wheels, creating heroes and foes more ridiculous than reality, rather than tapping into it. So some think this was all meant as a shocking what-if scenario, as in, what if we, the Batman writers, actually tried to make this the Batman for a new age? Some see it as a more earnest tale of a hero who had potential, but simply made mistakes along the way, trying to match the brutality of the world he operated in, a world that broke the last Batman. I invite you to make up your own mind about that as we go along. Now, let's begin.
I always encourage people to buy and read the original comics, as that's the real art here. But if you do want to support me in my effort to share them, then that's what the Patreon is for. On the Patreon, I only have one tier, set at $2. What I offer to the tier, named Imaginaut, is being listed in the credits of future videos and access to my exclusive episode commentaries, which I put research and effort into to make them both informative and entertaining. Also telling stories about the story's creation from the industry or related events from the comics world that occur to me, and sharing my personal memories of the story, as well as analyzing its deeper themes and meanings, and pointing out cool things along the way. Also, in the case of crossovers like Batman vs. Predator, I give my thoughts on the Predator film franchise as well and how it relates to the work. I've listened to every director's commentary on every DVD I've ever gotten my hands on, the first being Roger Ebert's commentary track on my cousin's Laserdisc of Dark City, probably around 1999 or so. That's on the Blu-ray too, by the way. Great movie. Anyway, I've always loved the format, and I hope I know what goes into making a good commentary. I'm including some samples of my commentaries, starting with a sample from my first one, the KnightFall commentary, and I'll include the first 5 minutes or so. There's chapters in this video if you want to skip to the next one, and please do note that they're just audio tracks on the Patreon. You'll have to sync it to play with the YouTube video in another window. This is in case there's copyright issues with me selling the comics images, so I'm only offering audio that goes with the videos, which are free on the Patreon, and I hope I'm doing that right. I'm modeling the other YouTuber commentaries I've seen on Patreon and other sites like Red Letter Media's commentary tracks are just audio. I think they're on Bandcamp. If you choose to support me, even if you don't listen to the commentaries, you also get the knowledge that you're really boosting my ego and my belief in my work, and are directly motivating my improvement of every art I practice. The writing, the performing, the editing, and the general story composition. Okay, here's the KnightFall sample.
Hi, I'm Nick. This is Fusion Space. Welcome to the commentary track for... I'll turn that all the way off. Yeah. Hopefully it's inaudible. Okay, welcome to the commentary track for my KnightFall video. This was the first video I had that hit 1,000 views and then hit 2,000 pretty shortly after that. It was right at the end of when I was doing my partial episodes. I'd started with a 20-minute runtime goal, thinking, not to test people's patience, and I got, well, good news and bad news. People were watching the part 1s, a lot of them, but hardly anybody would come back for a part 2 and 3, and it really bothered me that people weren't getting the whole story then. The last thing I ever wanted was to give people an incomplete story. The whole idea of the episodic format was to kind of replicate how comics came out for me. They would be week to week, month to month, and you'd get a little bit of the story, and you'd think about it in the off time in between chapters coming out. But by this point, I'd realized I'd rather make longer videos and make sure people at least have the opportunity to get a whole story out of one episode. And I've stuck with that ever since. So even the longer things that are adapted into several parts, each part should stand on its own, But KnightFall was always an important one for me to do. That middle issue, Broken Bat, when Bruce is just narrating his defeat at Bane's hand, that's one narrative piece that I've wanted to perform since I read it in the 90s. And that's when I found KnightFall. I got into the comics with The Death of Superman in 1992, and this was 1993 pretty much. So Superman was gone, the world was crumbling under our feet at this point, and then the next largest, most solid hero had the floor taken out from under him too. This is all, and I did a little research for this commentary. I just found out, I had always thought that KnightFall was created as a response to the sales boom of Death of Superman, but thinking of how fast it came out, it started right when Death of Superman is ending, that would be impossible. And it's true, KnightFall was in the works for quite a while before Death of Superman was even put on the plate. And I've got time. I'll briefly tell you about the Death of Superman, just the behind-the-scenes part, which you can find in documentaries and various interviews, but it's a great story of why the Death of Superman happened, and it informs on why KnightFall happened as well. So, there was a show, Lois and Clark, on the network TV, and it had just started. It starred Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher. And it was a good show, but the comics, they had just arranged a year's worth of stories leading up to the marriage of Clark and Lois, and then the TV people came in and said, hey, we don't want you to let them get married until we're ready to do it on the show, in about 4 years. So what happened was the super team, the 4 writers and artists, the 4 artists, had to scrap an entire year's worth of stories they had just planned out, and basically do it all over again. And they were so angry about it, then when one of their grizzled old men in the room, Jerry Ordway, whenever they were stuck on a problem, he would always suggest, let's just kill him. And everybody would laugh and say, "Oh, Jerry, you scamp," and then they'd get back to work on the problem. But this time, when the room fell silent after they heard they would have to redo the whole year's worth, and the first person to say something, "Let's just kill him," they were so mad. They're like, "Yeah, let's fucking kill him." And that's about how the documentary presents it. And that's basically why the death of Superman, they ran it up to their boss and said, "Hey, we want to kill Superman, and we're going to bring him back as, we've all got different ideas on what to do." And they said, "We like all your ideas, do all 4 of them." And that's why the 4 Supermen came back, because each team had a different idea, and the editorial just liked all of them so much. But it was all just meant to be an effort to tell the best story they could when faced with this editorial decision that no one saw coming, because the TV people didn't, make their demands known early enough, basically. They didn't realize the lead time that goes into making these. But so, because the sales went out of the park, they probably extended the runtime of the Reign of Superman arc, and that was what really got me into comics. The 4 different Superman. I had my money on Cyborg. He was the coolest to me. He had Superman's DNA. It all seemed to match. And of course, he was a villain. But KnightFall, I think, was fast-tracked. It had been in the works ever since Peter Milligan was leaving Detective Comics, and he had a conversation with editor Denny O'Neil about an idea for a villain that morphed into what Denny created Azrael from. And from Azrael came the idea of KnightFall, of someone who could fill in for Batman after this new villain, Bane, was going to tear him down, and it would be something you'd never seen before. And it was, after a comic has been the way it has for so long, you need something to change the game. It has to change or else it gets boring. And so, I do think that Death of Superman fast-tracked the KnightFall project, but I have no question as to why it was already in the works. It's a brilliant idea. The main message of the book, of course, was to highlight what a great hero Batman was, not because of his brutality and the damage he could do, but because of his restraint. They wanted to use Jean Paul, to basically highlight how great Bruce was. And, I had forgotten just how angry the fan base actually was about the new Batman. They got literal death threats, saying, "Bring back Bruce Wayne, or, we'll come down to your offices," whatever they would say in the 90s. And this was the time of, the Unabomber, so it wasn't exactly not taken seriously. We had crazies back then, too. It just wasn't... I don't even know, maybe it was quite as prevalent. The news just treated it differently. That's irrelevant. Anyway, about KnightFall, I had to make sure to include all these issues, because when you're in the Batcave sequence later, you're going to see flashbacks to, him fighting the Riddler. You'll see flashbacks to all of these events. And this is when Chandra Kinsolving is introduced. Now, this issue exactly, with the Breakout of Arkham, this was my first KnightFall comic. I didn't have the other 2 issues until years later. I pieced it together through back issues because I wasn't reading Batman at the time. I got into it maybe a year or 2 later, and I assembled it piece by piece. Now, back then, you couldn't simply go on the internet and look up. Even though there was an internet, you couldn't find, detailed comics events laid out, on Wikipedia now. There was nothing like that. The first comic story I even found described online was the Spider-Man Maximum Clonage saga, and only because it was such an editorial clusterfuck that it was kind of charting the ridiculous worm tale of where it all went. And this was just a unique site, like someone's Angel Fire GeoCities page they made just to tell the text version of the story with a few pictures here and there.
Honestly, I only want people to contribute in the case that they can afford to, that they love my work, they want more of it, and they want it to keep getting better. Or just want to hang out and watch an episode with me as a pseudo-friend. I use YouTube and commentaries both as substitutes for human contact, so while I might sound glib about it, it's a self-deprecating humor, and I absolutely welcome that illusion of companionship, because my audience very much does give me a real kind of emotional validation, so that's good enough for friend status to me. It's how I feel about many creators in many mediums. I think Stephen King said it best in his foreword for Dark Tower 7. "My work is my way of knowing you. Let it be your way of knowing me." It's enough. Say thank you. So if you want to know me better, these commentaries are the way to do it. Some will be less structured, like this clip from my Punisher Born commentary. Again, skip it if you like.
Hi, and welcome to the commentary track for Punisher Born. I absolutely love this origin of the Punisher. I'm not the biggest Punisher fan, but I do love Garth Ennis's version of him. I have read some other Punisher back to the 80s when he was a more traditional character, teamed up with Wolverine, things like that. And he's okay, you know. It's basically just Rambo or your classic 80s action hero or cop, you know, who's gone off on his own, you know. That trope, but done in comics. And, you know, I understand why it took off, but I don't think he really had that much of a character worth getting into until Garth Ennis took him on and really fleshed him out. But I don't know. I have not read I've read the Angel stuff where he dies and works for angels, and I got to talk about that a little bit, I think, in the other Punisher video. Anyway, I say pretty much everything I wanted to in the intro here, that I think Garth's origin is the best for Frank, that he belongs in this conflict in particular because of what I guess what a mistake it was, the way Garth presents it. I don't know much about the real life version of Vietnam, not nearly as much as I know about the fictional presentations of it. Garth Ennis does, though, and war comics in particular are a long-time love of his. He has a series for DC called War Stories that's just an anthology of tales from various wars through history, all very realistic. Like, this man knows his stuff. He's a student of war and history, and so I'm just presenting his perspective on the Vietnam War. I can't say if it's right or wrong or what's true or not. But I don't think it matters as far as the Punisher story is concerned. Or Captain Castle, as we see him here. And this is pretty much what I thought the Punisher would have been like, you know, imagining him in Vietnam before his, it's only ever just a few panels, like, we never got much of a story set in the jungle. It was just part of his backstory, like, this is why he knows war stuff, so that when he becomes Punisher, he's got all the knowledge he needs. But Garth saw him as a man who had already fallen in love with war, as one of the monsters created by Vietnam that, you know, in the main run, there's another guy, Frank Serdwood, who comes back stateside, and his family is, I think his family is killed, or maybe he kills them because he lost his job and he thinks they're going to run out of money, or something like that. He snaps and becomes a problem, and Frank has to catch up to him and take him down. And it's kind of a there but for the grace of God go I kind of thing. It's called Do Not Fall in New York City. I forget what issue number it is, but it's a fantastic run. But Punisher Max Punisher is the more well-developed character. It gets into more Frank's psychology. We're not just having fun with it, you know, we're actually examining the causes and the effects of his particular psychopathy upon the world. I think that's the right word. Like him exercising his unique psychology in action. There's a social worker that he teams up with. He has to rescue her, and she decides to kind of take an interest, and she puts to him the argument, you know, at this point you have killed not only all the men responsible for your family's death, but certainly all the men who ordered it, and anyone they ever knew. Frank has killed untold thousands of mobsters at this point. They've never really kept a count. But over, you know, he's been operating since the 80s for most of that time on Earth. He's racked up quite a kill count by now. So he is one of the greatest mass murderers in history. Especially when you consider they're all, you know, done like hand to hand. He didn't trigger some bombs to get that kill count. He earned every one with his fucking hands. And she says, like, how do you feel about that? Does that bother you? How do you sleep at night? And Frank is convinced that every single one of his killings was done for the greater good. That he saved innocent people, guaranteed harm. That, like, these people that he kills simply cannot or will not stop hurting the innocent. And so every one of them that dies at his hands is a net gain for the world. And Frank has seen these people in their lives, and this, you know, for so long, he's so utterly convinced of his rightness in this that he never questions it anymore. You know, nothing ever gives him pause. He knows well and good that someone needs to die and deserves to by his rules, that they will harm other people if left alive. You know, he calls it making the list. And he says he sleeps like a baby. There's a reporter who gets on his trail at one point and decides to handcuff himself to the Punisher for a story. My Night with the Punisher. Freaking genius, this guy. Anyway, towards the end of the evening, Frank has saved this guy from all kinds of death. But when he finds out that the guy, he killed somebody. But like, it was I forget if he like hit a guy with his car and then didn't turn himself in, something of that moral nature. And Frank says it never takes much to make the list. There's something this guy does that compromises him morally in Frank's eyes, and he ends the story jumping with him. Frank lands safely, and the guy in the handcuff, it lands in the equivalent of a wheat thresher. So Garth does nail down very specifically what Frank's moral limits are. Punisher's a very interesting character. He is a fun character to do adaptations of. I love the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. It's actually going to be my first video review, and I'm working on the script now. And I have a lot to say about it. I like the character. I like the concept. I love particular executions of it. But I wouldn't say I'm a long-time Punisher fan that I can tell you a lot about the comic beyond what I've read. You know, I do know that I liked him in Civil War, the actual event Civil War. But that horrible costume, go ahead and type into Google right now, open a window, Punisher Captain America costume. And is that not the ugliest goddamn thing you've ever seen? It's a mix of Frank's skull and Cap's star, and this red and blue, chunky, blocky color nightmare of a costume that he wore in memoriam after Cap died, quote unquote, at the end of Civil War. He was actually just sent through time. And would come back fine, but the world assumed he was dead because they saw him get shot on the steps of a courthouse and bleed out and stop moving. So, you know, of course you'd think that. See, Civil War is one of those things that you can't say it has an adaptation. The film and the comic have, like, nothing to do with one another. You know, the Sokovia incident is nothing compared to Stanford, where 600 children died as a result of direct superhero carelessness.
Finally, I will be branching out into reviews of movies and video games in the superhero genre, as I've seen and played pretty much all of them, at least those released in North America, and a few more that were never released. I'll possibly cover more than one game or film in one video, say all the Superman games up to a certain year, or all the Chris Reeves films, or I may focus on individual ones that I feel deserve a better rep in culture. Or especially games that might not be great for general audiences, but really hit the spot for a comic nerd who wants to be the character. My first planned review is of the classic 1989 action film The Punisher, starring the iconic Dolph Lundgren. It's one of those movies people might think less of if they've only heard about it and never seen it, and it's quite a solid action movie, and a great adaptation of the character. I'm well into the script, rewatching the film and picking clips to go with my thoughts. I'm well versed in the style of YouTube video reviews, and I assume you are too, and I hope to have something of a similar quality to what's already out there. I'm not sure if I'll have costumes and characters like some do, but given my voice talent, it's a definite possibility, but I'm not focusing on that as much as just selling the film. Other films I plan to review include Steel, Howard the Duck, Green Lantern, the 2000's Fantastic Four films, and the Roger Corman 1994 one, Ang Lee's Hulk, things from the same era of comics that I cover that I think are better than culture admits, if seen through the proper lens. I'll also be planning video game reviews of forgotten gems in the superhero genre, often perhaps not the best for every gamer, but perfect for people who want to nerd out and pretend to be the hero or have that experience. On the list are the first Iron Man game, Captain America Super Soldier, Green Lantern Rise of the Manhunters, but I haven't selected one to begin with or started a script yet. I just want to give you an idea where else my content is headed. It's the same theme of great comic book stuff you might not know about, or know how good it is. I now have 5 commentaries up on the Patreon for KnightFall and The Kingdom, both of which have around 4,000 views, Punisher Born, which is almost at 1,000, Emerald Twilight, which is just a very personal story for me, and for Batman vs. Predator, because I watched all the films while making it and had a lot of thoughts to share. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link is on my channel page and will be in the description from now on. But if you want to support me in free ways, just like, comment, subscribe, or share my videos to anyone who might like them. It all helps with the mysterious algorithm. And even if you do none of that, still, thanks just for watching. And thanks especially for subscribing. And I'll see you next time for the conclusion to my Dark Horse DC crossover series, Superman and Batman vs. Aliens and Predator. And coming soon, my first real movie review of the 1989 Punisher.